learned already to structure different kinds of innovation regarding the object, product, process, or service innovation. And we learned that the degree of innovativeness is a very important measure to really distinguish different kinds of innovation. A further famous differentiation is this of component versus architectural innovation, relating a little bit to the degree of innovativeness, but now rather technical to the degree of change in the product system. We'll explain this in a second with an example. But the idea is that we have to distinguish with different innovations. On the one hand side, regarding the components or core concepts, the building blocks of a product. And on the other side, on the interfaces, the system linkages that connect these components. An incremental innovation is something where we really keep the architecture and the interfaces unchanged and just improve a little bit our core components. A radical innovation is one where we really change everything. We set up a new architecture and we overtune and develop new components. Then there's so-called component innovation, which is now new to this game here. And the component innovation is I take the existing system and I just radically modify one component. This could be a little bit an electric vehicle, and many electric vehicles for a long time looked like normal cars, just the combustion engine was being replaced by an electrical engine. The entire architecture of the car was more or less the same, but we exchanged an important component. While an architectural innovation is one that really recombines existing components in a very novel way. Let's look into this in an example. And the innovation of bicycles provide a great example for this. You may know that when bicycles came up at the beginning, when it was really a new technology, there was many different competing designs how a bicycle should look like. And you all know from some museums this design shown there at the bottom of one very big wheel, which is good to put your power, your force from your body to the wheel, but which is very unsecure, very unstable. And so then quickly this common bike design that we still use nowadays came to market. It was called the safety bicycle, as it just was more safe to ride and to really keep on track. So think about it, what was it? The change from the old big wheel design to the safety design. Can you classify which kind of innovation it was? Well, it was definitely not an incremental innovation, as this would mean really to just improve perhaps one part of the bicycle here. However, it also was not a radical innovation, as the basic way of a bicycle were more or less the same. We can say the bicycle itself was a radical innovation replacing the horse. It was exactly an architectural innovation, as the basic components of wheels of change remained the same, but the way how we compound and how the infrastructure, how the system architecture is being designed was changed radically. Then later in the history of bicycle innovation, the safety bicycle design was improved in many ways. And now we came into component innovation. There are some more radical ways to the braking or the gearing systems, while the system itself, the architect, is being unchanged. And this is still apparently the best design. There have been a lot of experiments with design, and the internet again is full with funny looking bicycles, which either were component innovation, or here we could say another architectural innovation, as the way how to use this bicycle is very different to the common design. And this differentiation of different kinds of innovations is important for similar reasons as the degree of innovativeness as defined before. First, if we just go into incremental innovation, this is probably very unrisky, but also providing not too much opportunities to differentiate. Component innovation very often is a main driver of technical innovation. We can get a patent a protection for just improving a component. But we don't really have to deal about changing a system. Often we don't have to re-educate the customers or the markets or stakeholders. Regulation and all are the same. Of course, we have radical innovation, the holy grail, so hard to really change everything. But this is very risky and happening not too often. But Henderson Clark, the two scholars from MIT and Harvard that introduced this concept, said there is this interesting thing of architectural innovation that you take what is already existing there on the component level and recompose it in a novel way. Some people say this was exactly the iPod. Most of the components of the iPod were already existing. They were not invented by Apple. But Apple combined these existing inventions on the component level in a very novel and successful way. And this leads us to the final differentiation of different types of innovation, that between sustaining and disruptive innovation. And it really builds on something what we already had before. And this now is really about the degree of change from the firm perspective. It starts with incremental innovation, or here called sustaining innovation, improvements of merits, replacing an old model by a next and the better version. Second to this are so-called efficiency improving innovations, or so-called low-end disruptions. The idea here is not just average process innovation, but it's really that there is a radical process innovation that allows us to offer the same solution to the same customers at a lower price. Think about Walmart, the largest retailer of the world. They did not invent the supermarket. And if you shop at Walmart, the supermarket and the products they sell look more or less the same. But they were the first of really using IT to a very large degree of better planning their assortments, of optimizing the positionings of the products in the store. They engaged a lot in innovation in logistics and warehouse systems. So they offer exactly the same, but in a radical new way, and not just improving some of the components, but many of the core processes behind. The same was just-in-time manufacturing by Toyota. The same cars, but produced in a very different way. And finally, there are disruptive business model innovations in this framework, which, by the way, comes from Clayton Christensen, another another very famous innovation scholar colleague teaching at Harvard Business School. And Clay Christensen became famous for really defining this disruptive business model innovation, and where he said there are sometimes innovation coming up that really transform an existing solution, which often has been complex or rather expensive, in such a radical manner that an entire new market is being created. So it's often the result of a combination of a cost-reducing technology with a new business model. Think of video streaming. Video streaming is currently totally replacing the video rental store. And at the beginning, when video streaming came up, the quality was not so good, the download times were not so good. So it was first adopted by some niche markets that really cared about a special assortment of very special films that a normal video rental store could not provide. Later on, however, it really changed the business model. It has different revenue and pricing models, while the video rental store mainly builds on a price per day. Most of the on-demand services are streaming services where you pay a flat fee per month and can see as much as you want. It has very different cost economics behind, and it was what we call a disruptive business model innovation, creating a new market. This latter example also corresponds to one of the most famous frameworks in innovation management with regard to structuring different types of innovation, the so-called Ansoff matrix. Ansoff is again one of the early scholars of innovation, and he published this already in 1957 in the Harvard Business Review. And he says if you look into innovation, you have to distinguish two perspectives. One is the product or process perspective. Are we talking about new products or old products? And then it's a market perspective. Are we talking about new markets or old markets from the perspective of our firm? And similar to this, are we talking about usage situations or problems we solve for the customers which are novel or already existing? So traditionally, we start with product development. And product development means we have an existing market, an existing problem, and we develop a new product. While market penetration, category 2 here, is something where nothing has changed. We have an old market, an old product. Well, and all innovation here is probably market innovation. It's communications and just selling more of what is existing. So here it's not really an innovation, while this is the typical case of innovation management, creating a new solution to an old problem. Think of new medications or just-in-time manufacturing process. Then the other categories are relating to really having new markets. And this goes in line with the disruptive business model innovation I talked before on the previous slides. So diversification, category 3, is something what is often considered as the most innovative. This was exactly Christensen's disruptive innovation case, where a new product leads to really new opportunities. Think about the PC that replaced the mainframe computer. But it was not just replacing the mainframe computer, but really creating entirely new industries and usage scenarios. Finally, what could this be? We'd have an old product and put it into a new market. Well, this is something what is often called market development, and really find new uses for old products. This is something what sometimes happens in the pharmaceutical industry, where an existing pharmaceutical is found to also have an application for a different indication and brought into this market. Could be other uses for paperclip or for DVDs, or in process innovation that you use satellite imagery for testing soils, bringing something from the military into the agricultural field. So what we see here, we can structure our innovation both with regard to the result, but also how we set up a project in these two dimensions. Do we want to achieve something with a new product, or do we really want to create even a new market? So, as you saw on these two modules, there are many shades of innovation, and it's really important for you to know what you want to achieve. And the academic term for these are the contingencies of an innovation project. We have to know the context and its objectives.